Welcome back to the next episode in our Journey Management Playbook series. This is already episode number 8, and we are building something really interesting and hopefully very helpful for you over here. Our previous episode 7, was all about prioritization and how to integrate journey management into your existing workflows. It was about connecting your journey management practice to how your work is currently done in your organization. And now we're moving into episode number 8. Tingting, you're joining me again for episode number 8. This series has been done by you. I'm really happy that you're still here with me exploring the fascinating area of journey management. Episode number 8, what's in store?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And thank you for being in this journey together with you for this whole year. And sure, it's not the last episode, but we are going to cover very critical points this time to complete the story. As you mentioned that we discussed about the workflow, we discussed about opportunity solutions, prioritization, but then the critical question become, how do you actually measure the impact of your work? And how do you communicate this impact effectively to different stakeholders? So that's something we're going to tackle and discuss today.
That's a meaty topic, and I think a lot of us listening will be very interested because we often run into the challenge that we have these great journeys. As we said, we even know what needs to be done, but then getting the people around us in an organization to actually also contribute and commit to doing these actions is hard. And if you're not able to show how this potential work will impact the business, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle to get resources, get time, get budgets allocated, and metrics can hopefully help there a lot. So that's what we're going to unravel in today's episode, correct?
Exactly. And also, I actually just saw a LinkedIn post this morning that is very relevant. And it says traditionally journey mapping are very heavily focused on the qualitative side or qualitative sources of the research, but then quantifying the key points and measuring the health of the journey, the health of the business through the journey context is super important to get it communicated to the different stakeholders and so on. So yeah, when I read this, I was smiling that we're exactly going to talk about that this time. And I think this would be also a transition for many CX and service design professionals to extend from their expertise from the qualitative into the quantitative and retain the benefit of both sources of data and show a richer picture from the journey point of view and push action.
Yeah. So far we've discussed the tools, we've discussed the workflow, and now we're going to show and help you hopefully communicate that it's actually working what you're doing, right?
Exactly. And then we will also dive into something we've mentioned before, very briefly, that is about vertical storytelling. So we are going to compare what is horizontal storytelling from Journey and what we think is important to also add the vertical aspect of it to address the different stakeholders in the business in your communication. So that's also something we will dive into.
Yeah, I think vertical storytelling has a lot of potential. So make sure to stick around for the entire episode, because I think this might be one of the biggest insights and helpful practical things you'll get out of this. Okay. As always, there are timestamps down below in the show notes. So if you want to fast forward to a specific section or you want to go back to a specific section, which is more likely, use the timestamps and follow along with our journey. And if you have any questions about what we're discussing here, comments, questions, remarks, read all of them. You can leave a comment on YouTube or on Spotify if you're listening there, or you can even send us a message on LinkedIn. Now, Let's get into this. Episode 7, like I said, was about prioritization. We looked at where should I start working on? Like, what are the initiatives that the journey is telling us will have the biggest impact on our customers and on our business? But how do we actually close the loop that the things that we're implementing are working? That our hypothesis, that our assumptions about what's important, that they are actually important or not. How do we start? How do we start to do that?
Exactly. So we are now going beyond the so what question into what is happening question and what is the impact question. So this is also the question I get all the time from CX leaders. How do I show the ROI, for example? How do I prove that journey management is worth the investment? Because let's be honest, journey management need resources. Well, some of them can be converted from your existing expertise, but then you probably need to hire more people to do it. And then also you need to invest in tooling. So a lot of money is involved. How can I then prove there is a value for these investments? So we are then talking about the quantitative measures, like we mentioned in the beginning. And in the journey, this is reflected, of course, in the metrics. And with the metrics also, when we are talking about measurements from journey context, we're not talking about inventing new metrics for the journey management, particularly. Then we are going to create another silo of dashboard, right? No, but we are more talking about what is existing already. What are you measuring already? And how to connect your journey work to the metrics your business is already tracking and cares about, and then show your work, how your work moves the needles of these metrics.
Yeah. And this is something that we've been advocating for in all the previous episodes in this playlist. Like, don't try to create another silo. Make sure that the work that you're doing is integrated into what the organization is already doing. That will make your life so much easier.
Exactly. So then, if I give you a very concrete example, we are going to use Mark's community business again here. So what kind of metrics are you tracking that matters to your business goals, Mark?
We've talked a lot about this as well in the previous episodes, but a few metrics that are obviously important to me is how many members leave the community every month, every year. So that is a churn rate. We track, for instance, also how happy or how satisfied or how proud they are. We also track things like attendance rate in our sessions. So there are quite a few things that we are actually currently already measuring.
Yeah, exactly. So then in your journey, it would look like this. So now we are looking at a journey in They Do. This is the I Leave the Community Circle journey we have always been talking about in this series. And this is reflecting a real story from Mark's community circle. And as you see in this journey, we are having several numbers, the metrics here. And we have the churn rate as the most important metrics on the journey level. And that is what Mark is exactly measuring month by month. So as we see here in the graph, Mark's churn rate is now at 3.5%. And then what is your target, Mark?
For anyone who's listening and watching this, these are dummy numbers, but they are actually quite close to the reality. I don't know. My churn rate. Let's say that it's 2%. Let's say that it's 2%.
Yeah. So if it's 2%, then we will see. Okay, it is although decreasing over time, but we are still not at our target yet. And now you are actually measuring the business, right? So it's not a journey specific metrics, but actually it is the business metric that is one of your North Stars to measure your business performance. And then it directly impacts your revenue as this churn is an important measure. However, churn is like we already discussed in episode 2. It takes a little bit time to show the differences or changes or trends in this kind of business performance indicator like churn, because if you make some action, it might not immediately show in the numbers. So then we also need to understand like what, so we call this kind of metrics the lagging indicator. And in order to understand how we can impact the lagging indicator, we also need to look at the leading indicators.
So when you say it might take a little bit of time, I can imagine somebody listening to this will say, what do you mean? Because like churn, you see that every week, you see that every day, you see that every month. Like, how is that lagging?
Yeah, it's lagging because whatever action you have done in order to mitigate this, improve this metric, it might not be showing the impact immediately. So let's say we have implemented a solution, and that may take a month or even a quarter or even years to show in your lagging indicator.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we also need a leading indicator to have more swift understanding of what is the impact, and we then can expect the lagging indicator could change with the leading indicator. So that's why we also need this kind of metrics that we can see the impact immediately. And some of them are the measures we can track every day even, or in every session. For example, here under the step of engaging in community, we have this interesting metric called attendance rate of live sessions. So this is basically how members are participating in the sessions. How many of them invited to the session actually come to the live session, attending it. So this is a very straightforward number. And then with experience, Mark, as you have run this circle community for years, you probably know that the attendance rate of the live sessions might be one of the factors that will impact churn.
Mm-hmm.
Is it so? Of course, it's not everything, but there is a connection between them. It's an early signal.
Yes. Yeah. And this is not like proven or scientific in any way, but based on experience and seeing numbers and tracking these numbers, I'm pretty confident that members who attend more sessions are less likely to churn. So stated otherwise, if somebody is missing session after session in our community, they are not engaged, and therefore the chance that they will eventually churn is higher. Like, that makes sense. I don't have like a very hard chain to prove it, but I'm quite sure that that's the case.
Yes. So let's say the leading indicator is an early warning signal, or the early indicating signal for the change of a lagging indicator. And actually, we could have facts to prove the connection if we put them side by side. So as we have opened this attendance rate, let's look at the trend. So let's say attendance rate has been fluctuating, but it's improving over time, right? And then if we look at the churn rate, it's also been fluctuating, but there is a downward trend of decreasing. So we could say like, okay, these two is, of course, for our target, we want the attendance rate to go up and we want the churn rate to go down. And the trend shows us this. But that's not enough just to put them side by side. We also need to see like what we have done about it, what have impacted the trend of both indicators. So that with the historical data, we see the graph, the trend of all the metrics in this way, we can give it our interpretation. But then what's also important is to map our actions on top of this graph so we can have a clearer picture of the impact. So this is what we can do. For example, under this step of engaging in community, we have created or ideated many different solutions. We have established a healthy discussion forum. We also have qualification call. Well, it's under the other step, but then under this step is personal outreach by Mark prior to the first session. And this solution is actually live and it's implemented in the end of April. So with this information, we can actually make a connection. So what has changed since the end of April when we implemented this solution? We should be able to see it on the trend of the graph. So from the leading indicator, as we see, since we have implemented this solution, personal outreach by Mark, prior to the first session, we have seen an improvement. Although in the beginning, it still takes some time to being impactful, but then we see a positive trend since that. And then if we look at the churn rate, also after a month or so, after May, we see a quite steady decrease of the churn. So then we can say, okay, this is what has happened. So you put all the facts on the table now, and then you can propose your interpretation. And you can say, this solution, as we implemented it, it has positive impact to both the leading and lagging indicators. So this is how we can tell the story from the measurement point of view.
And this is really helpful. And this is, of course, a simplified example. Now, what if I have initiated not one, but 3 or 5 solutions?
Yeah. So with that, actually, we can show all the solutions on the graph itself and give it some interpretation. And then we will see like which solutions actually have moved the needle of the different indicators or different metrics, which ones actually didn't have any impact. And here is also important to consider the impact from both leading and lagging indicator. Let's say if you implemented a solution and after a month, you didn't see any change in either leading or lagging indicator, and you expect it to take some effect after a quarter. So you might give it a little bit time, but it's already early warning that this solution might not work. But then if you implemented a solution and you see immediate change or quite soon the changes in the leading indicator, but you haven't seen anything in the lagging indicator, you probably can expect some positive changes, but it takes a little bit more time. So in this way, you can be a little bit more confident in this solution without immediately changing to another solution. And in the third scenario, happy path is that if both leading and lagging indicator have a positive trend or having a negative trend, it will show you very clearly the impact of the solution, and then you can make your next steps quite clearly. So there are different scenarios here.
Yeah. And also what I'm getting from this is that if you start working on multiple initiatives that aim to impact a similar leading or even lagging metric, then you might want to reconsider and adding more granular metrics so that you can actually have a feeling which one is actually having an impact. Because if I have 3 initiatives and 2 of them have a positive impact on a metric and 1 a negative, then the overall metric, leading metric, might stay flat, but like you don't see which initiative actually is working. So that means that this is sort of a way of making things more granular and isolating what is it that you actually want to move, and if multiple things are aiming to move the same thing at the same time, that's basically a recipe for confusion and delays.
That's a very important point. And in order to achieve this granularity without creating more silos, I think the context of journey is really helping here, because as you see in this journey, you're able to measure at different steps of the journey with different leading indicators. And sometimes the lagging indicator can also be mapped at some step of the journey. So there's no strict rule where metrics need to be. It's really depending on your business context and your journey context. So where the measurement is in the journeys is already making your measurement more customer-centric while being connected to each other. So that's one thing. Another thing is, where do these metrics live in your workflow? If you have different teams in charge of different metrics, when do they look at them? How do they use them, right? How do you know if it's the contribution of this team but not that team? So granularity and contextualization from the journeys really help also tell the story. But of course, it's like you said, it's not really like a scientific formula, but it's really up to interpretation and storytelling. And we think with the journey context, it helps you to really bridge the customer point of view with the business point of view when you're telling the story to your stakeholders. So you're not only telling what is changing, but why is it changing, and what are the connection between these metrics for your customer?
Yeah, or at least you can have you can tell a story where there are some more grounded assumptions, because you can say, this is what we did this month, this quarter, these are the initiatives that we worked on, this is what we're seeing in our metrics. Like, there is a high probability that these two things are connected. Like, again, usually you can't make any guarantees, and you don't need to. Like, that's very time consuming and probably very expensive to make this into a scientific study. But as long as you can say, this is what we're working on, these are the priorities that we see, and this is what we're seeing in the things that we are measuring. Like, okay, let's say that these are influencing each other, right? So that's usually already, I wouldn't say more than enough, but this is already very, very helpful.
Yes. And also you can operationalize it, not only showing it in the journey, but you can have a continuous cadence of review and then readjust your prioritization with this measurement. So let's say you track your leading indicators weekly or monthly after implementation, and then what's happening to the attendance rate, for example, after I implemented a certain solution. And then you also track your lagging indicator in a longer cadence, for example, monthly or quarterly on your churn rate. And then with this regular review, you can ask all these questions together with your team. Did the leading indicator move? Did the lagging indicator start to change? And can you see a pattern there, right? So this become a continuous review together with the different stakeholders. And then you use this learning to inform your next cycle of prioritization. So even if you don't see any positive change, this is not failure. This is learning, right? Because that is important input for your next decision making as well.
And we've had here on the Service Design Show some other episodes about measuring. And I think one lesson that we can take from that is, when you're starting out with this journey management setup, focus on just one metric. Like, just pick one where you have some level of control over, and use that as your starting point, and keep tracking it, like you said, to see if you see patterns. Like, don't start tracking like 20 metrics at the same time and map the whole business. Like, pick one.
Yeah, this is very important. Start small always, but focus on the full story, even if it's a small scope. So then you can tell, okay, I have this insight, opportunity, solution, and then we did implementation. And this is the movement of metrics. And that is super important, even if you're just tracking one metric, to have this end to end. Because I've seen a lot of CX teams very good at telling the story with the insights, with the pain points, but then it's not closing the loop with the operationalization, like opportunity solution, prioritization, tracking, and then cannot also close a loop with the metrics. So that is a pity. Even if you have very, very rich insights for a certain context, it's not enough if you don't have everything in the full story.
What do you mean with closing the loop? Can you give an example?
Closing the loop means like we discussed in all the other episodes before. So we did the research, we understand what is the biggest pain, right? And then this is just understanding the picture, what is happening. But then we need to close it with what are we doing about it, like what we just showed here. This solution is what we have done about it, right? And then after we have made investment on this implementation, we need to see what is the impact with the metric graph change. And then we can make the next cycle of prioritization. So it's not only the research, it's also the action, it's also the measurement.
Yeah. So if we go back to maybe even episode number 1, we didn't start with customer insights. We started with what is a business priority. And in my case, it was all along like, how can we reduce churn? How can we increase retention within the community? That is like how this entire story started. And if I'm getting you right, closing the loop means, okay, we've made this full cycle. And what does this mean to the business challenge that we started with? Like, are we actually making progress towards the ambition that we had set in the very first episode, correct?
Exactly. And here's why it really matters. And I think this is the scenario many CX professionals and CX leaders need to face with. For example, your VP has given you the budget to implement some CX initiative. And 3 months from now, you're in your quarterly business review with the VP, and he asks, we invested in journey management this quarter. So what is the outcome? What is your return on investment? So if you cannot put your both qualitative and quantitative data together, you're just showing the journey. Look, we found these biggest pain points. This is really important with a customer. This is at this touch point. This is not enough, not really convincing. But if you are making the connection between them, you've been tracking your impact with the numbers. You can show, okay, look, here's the journey work we did. Here's what we implemented together with the stakeholders. And here is a metrics movement. And our business impact, therefore, is here. So then this becomes much more convincing for the VP. You're speaking their language.
Yeah. And again, this will finding the right metrics, the right granularity level is a skill. And this is something that you need to master. Like you said, you shouldn't try to invent new ones. But a lot of the things that we think are important from a service design perspective, from a CX perspective, sometimes feel very hard to quantify. That's where a lot of people struggle. But there are ways to at least find evidence, because that's what we're doing when we're having metrics. We're looking for evidence. And again, I would recommend looking at some of the other service design show episodes, especially with Stacy Barr, if you want to get better and develop your metric building muscle. Okay, so how would you summarize this section about journey frameworks, journey management, and metrics?
Sure. So first of all, you have to connect your metrics to existing business and not just inventing a new set of metrics. And second, use both leading indicator and lagging indicator to show the impact with different cadences. And third, let's create a clear cause and effect story by storytelling, by interpretation, and with the journey context. So you can mark when the solutions are implemented and show it side by side with the trend of the metrics, for example. And the fourth one is we need to use metrics for learning and iteration to operationalize your journey management, not just to prove you're right. And then, as usual, start simple with what you have. Don't wait for perfect data. Don't wait for 20 metrics to be measuring. And don't try to beg your data team to create 100 more pipelines. But start with what you have. Start simple. And then the last but not least, context really matter. And that's why the metrics in the journey differs from any other dashboard, because it's connecting the dots for you. Metrics without journey context, they're just numbers, but with a context, you can tell a story.
Well, yeah. And speaking about stories, we hinted at the start of this episode on horizontal storytelling, but also on vertical storytelling. So now might be a good moment to dive a little bit deeper into that. What do you think, Tingting?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect moment to start. So we've already talked about measuring impact through the metrics. So now let's talk about how to communicate your impact through what I call vertical storytelling. And I want to start by acknowledge something. I think most people in this field, in CX and service design, we are really good at storytelling, and we know how to create how to bridge the business value and customer value by bringing empathy to the room, right? You know how to create compelling narratives about customer experience, and then we can walk someone through a journey, help them feel the customer's pain and frustration. And that's all very good. But here's what I observe, actually. Many of us are excellent at what I call horizontal storytelling. If you think about a journey, the horizontals means we go through the phases and steps. We know where a pain point happen at which touch points, right? We have very rich understanding of different personas and we bring empathy. But sometimes we struggle with a vertical storytelling.
And like the horizontal is from left to right, like you said, moving through the stages, basically telling like the narrative from a customer perspective or employee perspective. This is what we're good at. This is what we know how to do. Like you said, we are storytellers, whether through words or through visuals or through both. We really put the empathy back into organizations. That's one thing, but that's horizontal. That's not vertical.
Yeah. So vertical storytelling is a little bit different. Again, if you think about a journey, because we're talking about journey context, right? You can do everything here in the journey. It's about not moving left and right through time anymore. It's more about moving up and down from that journey to show the business impact and strategic alignment. So, for example, going up from the journey, it means from specific customer pain, you can identify opportunities and then you ideate solutions. You show the metrics like we just mentioned. Then you can connect it back to the business goals and to strategic objectives. So now you're talking business language. Now the VP is listening, right? And then going down, also, that means going down from the strategy. You're able to start from a strategy, from a business goal to the metrics that tracks them. And then you can show the solutions that impact those metrics, then which opportunities are driving the solution, which problems these solutions actually addresses. And then you can show what is driving all these prioritization and decision making are actually the customer insights in the journey context. So both by going from top down and bottom up, you can show how the journey context and how the customer research really contributed to the positive moving of your business measurement.
It's almost like literally adding another dimension to your storytelling. So if you only have the horizontal storytelling left to right, that's one dimension. But if you have an additional axis, top to bottom, vertical, then you literally have added a second dimension to the story that you're sharing. And that second dimension doesn't take does not only take a customer perspective, but it also takes the business perspective into account, and you can use that story to the word isn't convince, but to get other people in the business along who maybe resonate more with that specific story, or at least who maybe start with that story.
Yes. So it's about also treating your stakeholders as customers in a way, because I personally have gone through this pain myself as a CX professional in my previous work. So sometimes when I walk through the journey to other stakeholders that never have, been familiarized with the journey, then I would, if I go through like first the customer become aware of our product, then they visit our website, then they sign up, and then they log in for the first time and so on. This is all correct. But then the other stakeholder, let's say an executive of a CIO who need to give me budget for a certain improvement. And then maybe he's just there sitting and thinking, yeah, this is all very interesting and this is new for me, but what am I supposed to do with this information? Where should we invest? What's the ROI? And how does this connect to our quarterly objectives? Right? So this is all the pain I have personally gone through, that people feel very interested about the story we're telling, but they don't know what to do with it. So that's why we need to lead with a vertical story.
And that is maybe a sort of controversial thing. And I would also argue maybe a very healthy thing for our field, our practice. Like, let's start our stories by starting from a vertical perspective. Like, if we don't have the vertical perspective, if we don't have that angle, the other perspective, sort of the horizontal, the customer story, will be so much less impactful and so much feel less relevant to the people around us. So next time you're working on a journey, think about, okay, do I have my vertical story already in place? That will be a very big paradigm shift in our field, but I think a very necessary and needed one.
Yeah, and definitely don't get me wrong. It's not about changing the contents of what you're working on, changing the empathy. It's not. It's about translating. And it's about, again, treating your stakeholders as your customers, being empathetic with them and try to solve their pain points as well. And combining the vertical and horizontal storytelling is very powerful. And we shouldn't just focus on one, but we need to focus on both.
Yeah, I like that. And I like how you framed it as your business stakeholders are also an audience, and they have specific needs, specific desires, specific things that they are interested in. And we need to make sure that our stories resonate with them. Could you give, like, to spark our imagination, like, what is an example of a stereotypical vertical storytelling thing?
I can give you an example, maybe with a demo. and this time not with Mark's circle community, because we need a little bit of more complexity there.
I like complexity. Sure, let's go.
Yeah. So I actually prepared an example from the airline industry, because you know, like, airlines are huge, gigantic enterprises. There are different departments, and there are different touch points with the customer. So it's perfect to show how your customer experience work, the journey work, can be shown easily in the vertical storytelling. So let's dive into it. And we also need different levels of storytelling. And I will give you some tips of vertical storytelling in the moment. But now I'm just giving you an example how this presentation would probably look like. So let's say you are the CX lead now presenting to your CEO regarding our year's target and how the findings of the team are contributing to this target. So let's say in this executive view, you're showing the key numbers, key business goals for the airline company this year. One is the cost per available seat mile. So that one, we need to drive it down. And the target is 14 cents. And now we are still at 15.9. And it's too high and above target. And then on the other hand, the ancillary revenue per booking is another target. And this needs to be driven up, of course. And the target is more than $75, but we are currently at 68.2. So we are below our target or above our target, both negatively. And why is that? So actually, in this journey, we can already see some very important friction happening at the Dream and Book and at the airport step. So first, we have the booking and payment challenges. And then we also have airport service experience challenges. And in order to increase the ancillary revenue and continue to reduce the cost per seat over time, we need to solve these challenges. So that is a very simple view to your executive.
This is very high level. This is very strategic.
It's very high level.
Yeah.
Indeed. So that's why we need to also dive deeper, because the story doesn't end here. This is showing what is happening from the numbers and from the insights, but we need to dive deeper. So we have then another level of the journey to show a little bit more of rich insights and what is happening across the team. But then, because this contains all the insights from our business end to end, we need to also find some pointers what is the biggest frustration from our customer. So with this kind of view.
Which view is this? Because I haven't seen this before.
Yeah, so this is a new pulse view from They Do, and it actually summarizes your top insights and the progress of your opportunity, and then the progress of your solution from the journey. So the data is totally from the journey, but it gives you a nice dashboard to easily find the most important information. And you can, of course, also do that with the other tools. Like if you have a journey map, you can actually mark where is the biggest pain point and so on. But the most important thing is you need some pointers to point out where to look, because otherwise you are lost in the too big of a journey. So here we can surface the backdrop challenge is actually one of the biggest challenges. Actually, the top one is also about backdrop. So both of them are important. And then we can see, okay, the backdrops are actually an interesting frustration. Of course, it's not good frustration from the customer. Why is that? Because if we think about our business target, it is driving the cost up while driving the revenue down. Because if customers are frustrated about backdrop, they are less possible in the future to purchase the check-in the bag check-in service, and also they need more support with the ground personnel and so on, and that drive the cost up as well. So then we argue that this is a very important pain that we need to look at. But then identifying the pain is not enough. So we need to dive deeper again. So this is the pain we find important from end-to-end journey. But then the actual journey of I check a bag become very important to look into more deeply. So here, then we can see, okay, in this journey, the team that is in charge of this journey have done some work. So we previously have shown what is happening, but then now we are showing what are we doing about it, what we have done about it. So actually we can show in this journey, the team identified and prioritized this opportunity called how might we simplify the backdrop process to reduce drop-off challenges. So this is a very high value opportunity that stand out from other opportunities in this journey. And we have then identified 3 solutions that we can mitigate it. And then one of the solutions actually went live in the end of August. So that is our vertical story from the numbers to the pain point to what we have done about this. And then going back to the highest level, we are still talking to the VP, right? Or CEO, I don't remember. And then we can show them in these metrics. We can show this solution we just implemented are actually driving the positive trend of both of these metrics. So that is then closing the loop of our story.
And you're connecting the dots basically. So it's going from the practical initiative all the way up to the level of the person you're talking to and the things that they are responsible for. Like that's what is their yearly or quarterly review going to look like? What are the performance metrics that they look for? So you will not always sit with the board level members, but even if it's with your boss, they will have KPIs, they will have a responsibility, and then you don't need to go to level 0 in your journey, but you can go 1 level up, 2 levels up, depending on who you're talking to, right? But it's about threading your activities, your insights, your opportunities to the impact that you're trying to make on the business.
Yes. So, Mark, I totally agree with you. And this, let me put it also really clear. This is not about abandoning the customer empathy or becoming purely business focused. It's about translation. And it's about translation to the right stakeholder that you're talking to. And my example here was just an example targeting to a high-level executive, but you might be talking to different stakeholders with the same journey material. And then you need to be proficient in understanding their needs and translating it into their language. And think of it just like being bilingual. You need to speak both the customer language and then the business language, the stakeholder language, and then you need to translate between them. So I think this is a really good segue to what I want to show you as some practical techniques or tips in the vertical storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah. So the first technique is actually stakeholder specific views, like what we just talked about. Different stakeholders need different level of detail and different types of information. And that's something maybe we can also dive deeper next year on how your framework can accommodate different needs of the business. But then basically it's very simple. Your CEO doesn't need to see every customer quote and every pain point, right? And but your product team probably does. And so you need to create the different levels of views for the same journey for different audiences. So here, as I just showed. In L0, the traveler overview, you have probably this for the executives. So in this kind of view, you will show high-level journey phases, not going too much into the nitty-gritty steps, and you have aggregated metrics and trends that these executives are caring about. And then probably the top pains and top insights, and then the opportunities, only the top ones that they can understand the story and also track the progress. So the high level progress can also be shown visualized in a bar chart instead of detailed solutions, for example. But they need to be connected back to the ROI projection. So that is the executive view. And then you can also dive deeper into a director level view. For example, this view is for the director of CX, and she or he might want to see what is happening and why is it happening and what should we do about it. So in this view, you should have the connected data across the life cycle of the travelers from end to end to see how everything connects. But then this is a bit too much, and nobody can assimilate everything, all the insights at once. So you need to have a clear report like this to show what's on top. What is the most important thing that drives the decision making and operation? Then you also need to provide nested journeys to show what are the different teams responsible about, what are the health of the journey, what are the actions in this simple view. So the director can really talk to the right people when they need to drive certain actions. And then the last but not least, we have this most detailed journey of check a bag. And you might already start to think what kind of team, what kind of stakeholder is it for? And usually this is for product and operation teams. They might want to know these more detailed step-by-step journey because it's a smaller touch point, so it's easier to show more details without making the journey overly long. And then the specific pain point they need to solve. So these probably can be distributed by the director of CX, or it can be from their own research, but they need to have specific pain points. And the important thing here is the action. So the opportunities derived from these insights, the prioritized opportunities, and then the detailed solution requirements that can allow them to start implementing and updating the status of these solutions. So everything like this, when they tie together, they can automatically bubble up the data across different levels, and then we can show the correct tracking of the progress and the tracking of the metrics. So the impact really goes across different levels.
And the example that you've shown here is already very comprehensive. It's almost like the perfect journey management example where you have all the levels already mapped. That's great to show what's possible. I can imagine that many of us who are listening will sort of be maybe on the quote-unquote most detailed level, but what we hopefully have convinced you of in this conversation is that this is a gateway for you to get involved in the more strategic conversations, because you now have a reason to say, hey, I'm really curious, how is this initiative that I'm working on contributing to what? What are we contributing to? How are we measuring that? Because I need to be able to tell a vertical story. Like, you can use that as an excuse. I want to tell both stories, like the horizontal one and the vertical one. And in order to tell the vertical story, I need to understand a bit more about how the business is operating. What are we working towards? So this solves, or this hopefully helps to mitigate a pain point a lot of us professionals are feeling, that we are not getting involved in those important decision-making conversations. well, now you have a reason to get involved, right?
Exactly. And also, then briefly, I would like to share the second technique that is a vertical cascade, like you mentioned, Mark. So, how to be super focused on these vertical elements. So, sometimes you can even go out of the journey context and just show the essentials. So, if we go to the goal view, and like Mark, you mentioned, we need to also understand the business a little bit more. What are they actually talking about? What are they prioritizing? What kind of decisions are they making? So, this kind of goal setting process is quite essential. And let's say we have a goal in the company called reduce cost per seat mile. And then you can actually show what kind of opportunities and solutions you actually identified to contribute to this goal. And then the target metrics of this goal, you can link the ancillary revenue per booking to the goal as well by telling your story and arguing why this is an important metric that can contribute to your company's strategic goal. And then everything can come down into the opportunity, and what is driving the opportunity are the insights. So you will also be able to access all these quotes and insights that are related to customer pain. You can show the actual journey where these insights are and opportunity are contextualized inside. So this is not only a list of planned items, but this is a list with the connection to your actual insights, research, and journey context.
Yeah, so this view that we're looking at right now is much more a cause and effect view. Like, we're doing this and then we hope that it will impact this, and if this impacts that, then and so forth and so forth, right?
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Yeah,
Without the necessity to even show a journey, because sometimes
exactly.
you have limited time, but everything is also weaved into the journey context, weaved into your research, so everybody can see the value of your work as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great to have this view as well, and to be able to switch between, like, do we want this goal setting tree view, or do we want to have the full context of the journey? It depends on who you're talking to. Cool. So horizontal storytelling, vertical storytelling, getting involved into those strategic conversations, translating what we're seeing and where the opportunities are in a language that people who aren't that familiar with journeys also understand. Is there anything you feel we haven't yet explored and touched on with regards to vertical storytelling, or is this pretty much it for now?
Yeah, I think we have touched almost everything, and just briefly more tips. One is, as we have been emphasizing, lead with the metrics and follow with your story, combining qualitative and quantitative, but start from the language the others can understand, which is usually metrics. Another one is you can also make it into segment specific stories. When you tell the story, you can also compare like which persona, which segment is this story related to? Are these pain related to? When you argue that these are the top pain points, you can also put the personas up front so that you can argue, okay, this enterprise customer is 80% of our revenue. This represents a big pain that is more important than the other pain, which represents like 20% of our revenue as well. So combining the business language with your segment, with your customer characteristics would also help here. So that's everything about vertical storytelling, at least that I know. So you might also have ideas to enrich this concept. So let us know if you have.
Yeah, leave a comment. And again, I think this is maybe a provocation or a challenge, or maybe even a paradigm shift in how we think about our work. And what would happen if after this episode, the first thing you try is to, what is my vertical story? Do you have one? Can you easily communicate one? Who would you share it with? And if that is your starting point for the next journey-related initiative project, I think that would change a lot. It would get us, hopefully, more of the influence that we're looking for. Cool. Are we able to wrap up? Tingting, is there anything you feel we, at the end of this episode, definitely shouldn't forget? Like, how can we take this into our day-to-day next to what I just shared?
Yeah, maybe we can share some action steps. And to wrap up this episode, you have, of course, already identified some actions. Let's put them in more practical steps. Yep. So step number 1, you probably already have done that from the previous episode, but let's check whether you have this in place. Let's say you're starting your journey management initiative. Let's start by identifying 1 to 2 business metrics that connect directly to your journey work. And for example, if you're working on onboarding, what kind of metric track onboarding success, and so on. So step number 2 is about the tracking system of these metrics. So set up some simple tracking, give it a context. Even if it's just manually recording the numbers every week or month, well, if you have just a handful of metrics, manually updating them is not impossible. Remember that, because I see a lot of people are waiting for all the integrations to be in place, and that can take a long time. But if you start small, you don't need all the technical possibilities to be in place. You can already make an impact. And then the third step would be look at your next stakeholder presentation. When is that? What kind of ceremony? What kind of occasion is that? Who are you presenting to? It might be a quarterly review, a project proposal, a budget proposal, executive briefing, and so on. Think about your presentation, think about vertical storytelling, restructure it to start with a business context and strategic objective. And then step number 4 could be create one particular stakeholder perspective view of your journey. So that's about your journey context. So you have all these journeys in place, you have all the material and data to present, but then how could you focus and restructure it to suit that stakeholder's view? Treat the stakeholder as a customer, like we just mentioned. Maybe your VP of product or your CFO, they're very different people, they have different needs. Last but not least, have a conversation with someone on the business side of your organization. It can be finance, strategy, business operations, and so on. Ask them, what metrics do you track? What decisions are you trying to make? What information would be most valuable for you from our journey work? So that then make it become a dialogue, and you take input contribution also from other stakeholders, involve them early because you're going to need it in the collaboration.
Yeah, and that last step alone, if this gives us the excuse to have those conversations, like to talk to the CFO and think and understand their perspective and what is important for them, what are they responsible of. If the vertical storytelling element is the thing that gets us in the door at the tables, that would already be super helpful. We, Tingting, have done 8 episodes so far, and I think it's a good moment to do a quick recap, because it's a lot, but I think we've laid the ground for very solid core framework. So let's go. Let's recap. Episode 1 was about identifying a business challenge. No, not just a business challenge, an important and critical and relevant business challenge, using my circle community as the starting point. Episode 2 was about getting data, qualitative, quantitative, seeing what we have, where is it coming from, what do we have to work with. Episode 3 was actually how do we translate that into a journey. That was the first episode that we showed a journey on screen, which was really interesting. Episode 4 was about the data that we have in the journey, the insights maybe that we already have in the journey, which were partially created using AI. AI helped us a lot to create that first step. How do we know it's correct? How do we verify? How do we tag? So giving more of a confidence score to our journey. That was episode 4. Episode 5 was a really interesting one. I remember that we introduced a 5x12 framework. Basically, we said, let's simplify the journeys that we have. Like in this episode, we also showed very complex journeys, or rich is probably the better word. But if you're starting out, use a journey, have 5 phases and 12 cards, I think, something like that. I need to double check, but that's what the episode 5 was about. Episode 6, so we have insights, but what are the opportunities? What are then the solutions that arise from that? Because we're working towards something. How do we identify those? Last episode, episode 7, was about, again, how do we take those opportunities and solutions and actually integrate them into how things are done, how our organization currently operates, so that they actually get implemented. And now today, in this episode number 8, we looked at how do we, like you said, close the loop. So we had an initiative, we worked on it, and is it actually making an impact on the business challenge that we defined in episode number 1? That's a lot, but like I said, I think it's a pretty comprehensive, a very stable starting point for anyone looking to get their journey management efforts off the ground in a very efficient way. Although, again, 8 episodes sounds like a lot of content, but we try to go very deep and show very detailed overviews here so that you can actually work with that. But once you have done this once, twice, 3 times, you'll get so much more effective and efficient. And again, one thing to add here is if you know the key thing to work on, if you know where to focus your energy, eventually you'll go much faster. Anything to add to this, Tingting?
Yeah, I want to add what's exciting is our collaboration, Mark, because you've put this into a real context for all our episodes, and we are using your real examples, tackling real challenges, showing the practical implication at every step. So thank you for the context, and also thank you for those very interesting questions that help us to go deeper and go to the real life questions.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun and a good excuse for me to start looking at my own service through a journey perspective, which sort of sounds weird as a service design professional. Sometimes I also forget. So this was very helpful. Now, one might think, are we done? Is this it? Is there more, Tingting?
We have indeed covered a very solid foundation of our playbook, the core practices that every organization needs to get journey management work effectively. But there are, of course, some advanced topics we haven't touched yet, like how to sustain the journey management over time, how to scale to multiple teams, multiple regions, and what kind of ceremonies and rituals can keep journeys alive, how to handle organization change and change management. And also we discussed like advanced journey hierarchies and frameworks at scale. We took a sneak peek today, but not able to go deeper. Strategic level application of journey management. We show some tips, but not going deep enough on that level. So there are a lot of things we can still talk about in the future episodes.
Yeah, we would love to hear from you. What are the advanced topics that you'd like us to cover? Anything from the list that Tingting just mentioned, or is there anything else that you feel would be an interesting topic to dive into? We are looking how to extend this journey management playbook, but it needs to be relevant to you. So tell us, what do you want to hear? Leave a comment, as always, on YouTube or Spotify, or reach out to us on LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to receive a message over there. Tingting, thanks so much for being on this journey with me, with us, the listeners here. It was a pleasure, and I hope that we can continue this into the future.
Thank you, Mark. And bye, everyone. See you soon.